Hey YouTube, Kira Twig here, bringing you all my Gishki Spright Yugioh deck profile for post the February 2023 ban list. Now, funny story about this deck, I actually got first place at my Photon Hypernova sneak preview using this deck at full power with Sprite Elf at 3, but sadly, I did one video for the deck profile and Sprite Elf is now banned, so making the video with the deck at full power would be redundant since we're going to have an updated list on the 14th. So with it, I wanted just to update the deck with what I would still play, as I would say as full power Gishki Sprites as you could without the Sprite Elf. And with it, still happy with the results. I may even resort to using 3 gigantic Sprite now, with Sprite Elf no longer being an option to use in the deck, but still love Gishkis, love Sprites. Putting them together just makes for an awesome combo to use with all the level 2 Gishki monsters we have. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So for the Gishki monsters, I run 2 copies of Gishki Neramanus. You can ritual summon this card with any Gishki ritual spell. If it's ritual summon, you can target 1 water monster in your graveyard, special summon it. It cannot be destroyed by battle with a monster special summon from the extra deck. And once per turn, when your opponent activates a monster effect, quick effect, you can return 1 Gishki ritual monster you control to the hand. And if you do, negate the activation. If you do, shuffle into the deck. So not only is it hard to get over this card with an extra deck monster, but you also have the monster effect negation thanks to this card, and the special summon option. If you have another Neramanus in your graveyard, you can special summon it onto the field and then have a rank 10 Xyz play to even go into if you need to go for burn damage against your opponent with cards like Gustav Max. Now, I chose 2 Neramanus over Zealgigas, just the life point exchange when you would lose life points activating your Gishki Necromere, attributing your opponent's monster to summon this card out, and then just the 1000 life points can really dwindle you down when you're also taking into consideration Sprite starter in the deck. So 2 Neramanus I find just to be the best number to run for consistency in special summoning a resource that can also just take away from your opponent's monster effects. I also run 3 copies of Gishki Grimness. If you ritual summon exactly 1 water ritual monster with a card effect that requires the use of monsters, this card can be used with the entire tribute. And if it's normal or special summon, you can special summon 1 Gishki monster from your deck except for Gishki Grimness. You cannot declare attacks except with ritual monsters, and with only declare attack with ritual monsters until the end of this turn. You can only use this effect of Grimness once per turn. So it's not really a restriction. If you consider, runic sprites not even being able to have a battle phase with the following play, when you activate your runic cards, being able to only attack with ritual monsters isn't as bad either. It gives you a level 2 monster, which most of the time you'll want to summon out Gishki Abyss to gain an additional search, and then from there you can overlay your 2 Gishki monsters together with your Grimness and Abyss that you summoned out onto the field. For the other monster, we are running 3 copies of Gishki Abyss as well. Abyss just gives you a search anytime it's summoned. It was, at full power with your Sprite Elf. I was able to successfully get the search off 4 times in one go during the tournament, just having the initial special summon off of Grimness, overlay the 2 together with Gigantic, then special summon another one with Gigantic Sprite, and then from there, use that one and the Sprite to go into Elf, and have that search from your Elf. And then if I did any of the plays before that with Neramanus, having a search off of Abyss before you were locked into 2s, that would be 4 searches in total. So very, very useful at 3 of. I also run 3 Gishki Shadow for the ritual spell search, and also it can be used for the entire tribute of a water ritual, and you can discard it just to add 1 Gishki ritual spell from your deck to your hand. So an excellent searcher in the deck, and just another one you can search off of Gishki Abyss, just like your Gishki Vision, which I'm also running 3 copies of, being used as the entire tribute, and then being able to discard this card to be able to add a Gishki ritual monster. So with that, we have our search for both of the Gishki Neramanus that we run in the deck also. And moving on now to the Sprite engine, I run 3 copies of Sprite Blue. At least the main deck still remains at full power for Sprites, Elf being the only thing that got hit for the deck. So 3 copies of Sprite Blue. If you control a level or rank 2 monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. So with that, if you have your Gishki monster, even just let's say Vision, or your Grimness or Abyss, so even if you just normal summon Abyss and it gets Ash Blossom, you at least have the Sprite engine to rely on to special summon out into the field and give you an additional search. 3 Sprite Blue just give you a search for the monsters, while 3 Sprite Spright Jet give you the spell and trap card search. We run Spright Starter and also Spright Gamma Burst. So with that, we have plenty of options for the deck. I said Gamma Burst, but I meant to say Smashers. For the search, I may run Spright Double Cross. It's more of a side deck card for me to use, but it's always an added option for main deck play. But Spright Jet just giving you more and more spell and trap card search on top of just working so well with the many Gishki level 2 monsters that we run as well. For the one-ofs for the Spright monsters, I run 1 copy of Spright Carrot and 1 copy of Spright Red. For the monster effect negation and also just the spell and trap negation. And for, once again, the fact that we just have so many other level 2 monsters in the form of the Gishki monsters to use for the tribute for our Spright monsters. And then for the rest of the main deck monsters, just 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, hand trap of choice, just being able to stop additional searches of my opponents, and then also have plenty of negations on the field. Like I said, at full power with Elf, this deck was quite scary. I still have plenty of plays to go for in the deck, but with Ash Blossom just as an added hand trap to stop any search or graveyard setup my opponent may try. That is it for the monsters. We do run a good majority of monsters, but now we'll move on to the spells. I run 1 copy of Gishki Aquamirror and 1 copy of Gishki Necromirror. Now, Necromirror definitely put in a lot of work at the sneak preview just for the fact that it can be used to ritual summon any Gishki ritual monster. You must also tribute monsters from your hand or field whose total levels equal exactly the level of the ritual monster you ritual summon, or tribute 1 face-up monster your opponent controls. And if you ritual summon using this card, you lose life points equal to the original attack of the ritual summon monster. And if this card's in your graveyard, you can target 1 Gishki monster from your graveyard, place that card on the top of the deck, and place this card on the bottom of the deck. Now, what I love about this card is it gives you options for tributing your opponent's monsters. You can even tribute an Xyz monster or a Link monster your opponent may have, and just that'll cost the whole tribute for the ritual play, because it says, or tribute 1 face-up monster your opponent controls. It doesn't have to be an exact level matchup like your other requirements when you use your own Gishki monsters. And then Gishki Aquamirror just having the same requirements, but if you use cards like Grimness and also Vision and Shadow to make the whole tribute, then you can get out your level 10 monsters no problem and have the recycle power to add Aquamirror back to the main deck and adding a Gishki ritual monster back from your graveyard to your hand. And I also run 3 copies of Focused Aquamirror. This card was honestly, I would say, just to bait out my opponent's hand traps. It adds a Gishki monster from your deck to your hand. And during the end phase, if you control a water ritual monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard to set 1 Aquamirror spell or trap directly from your deck or graveyard. So I had more search options for the, let's say, Aquamirror that I didn't search out with my Gishki monsters. But then, even if my opponent stopped this card with the hand trap search, as long as I had a Spright monster and another level 2 monster in my hand, regardless of the fact if it was Abyss or Grimness, I still had a play to go into. So like I said, the Searcher, not even being a once per turn, is very good. And like I said, most of the time, if the search did resolve, I had a better search to rely on the following turn. For these Spright spells, I run 3 copies of Starter. I'm surprised this didn't get hit. It's just such a good spell in the deck. It special summons a Spright, and then you take damage equal to the original attack of that card. But then you are also locked into level, rank, and link 2 monsters for the rest of the turn, but still not so bad when you have plenty of Gishki monsters just to summon out. The biggest weakness, obviously, when you use Gigantic or Starter is you can't go into your level 10 Naramonis, but still, it's just says afterwards, so you can always summon Naramonis first, and then go into your Spright Starter, which I did a lot of my engine with the Gishki cards first, and then use Starter to go into the Spright engine. And then also 1 copy of Spright Smashers for a banish option to use against my opponent. And for more of the generic spells, I do run 2 copies of Pot of Prosperity. This card was always sided out during the following games if I went second, just because mostly with my draw for my 6 card in hand, I would get what I need for the engine, but sometimes if I was just short 1 card, this card definitely did come in handy, and you're not really locked into any cards. If you don't have Pot of Prosperity, you can always replace it for some other draw options. You can run Upstart Goblin, Monster Reborn, just because Gishki Abyss can be summoned wherever, and then Upstart can just add that additional draw. And then lastly, just the 1 Call by the Grave for more graveyard shutdown of my opponent to stop any of the resources. It came up great against Totally Awesome when my opponent would tribute the Totally Awesome in the Spright Mirror match. And then the only trap that I run in the deck is Infinite Impermanence, just as another monster effect negation, especially if my opponent goes first, and they just have that normal summon play to set up. Now moving on to the extra deck, like I said, no changes were made to the main deck from when I played it at Locals. The only change now were the fact that I did run 3 Spright Elf in the deck, but now that the card is banned and we have the list right around the corner for our Gishki cards, I'm thinking about changing up, and here's what I made change-wise for the deck. I run 2 copies of Gigantic Spright. Depending on how often I go into this card, this might even become a 3 of in the deck. If I were to do so, I'll show you what card I would take out for this card. It just gives you a special summon for the fact that you can overlay in this and special summon out Gishki Abyss or any of your Spright monsters. If you've already used the Spright monsters, then Gishki Abyss is the next best target for that added search. I also run 1 copy of Onimaru's Soul Sweeper, 1 Sky Cavalry Centauria, and also 1 Super Dreadnought Rail Cannon and 1 Divine Arsenal Zeus for all of the overlay plays, but also for the fact that I have a 2000 burn and then also a Sky Thunder to go into afterwards. For the Link monsters, I wasn't running Sprint or the Nightmare Cerberus or the Dark Charmer. These were all the cards I substituted for the 3 Spright Elves. They definitely don't make up for it in any way for just the power of Spright Elf, but I have more of a graveyard setup thanks to Spright Sprint, being able just to send and set up more other Gishki monsters, Nightmare Cerberus for destruction, and then Dark Charmer is just another resource to take a Dark attribute monster from my opponent's graveyard and use it for myself. I did use the 1 IP Masquerena. This card definitely did come up a lot with the Spright Elf play, but still hoping to rely on it to go into some bigger Link monster plays in the extra deck, including Nightmare Unicorn, Access Code Talker. I went into Avermax a lot, just nobody had really any outs to go into it, and then 1 Topologic Zeroboros and 1 Underworld Goddess for all the bigger Link options to go into, because you can swarm the field with a good amount of monsters. You may not be able to attack with those monsters for the turn, but you can at least make these bigger boss monsters to either clear out cards your opponent may have or at least take away from that resource and make it difficult to get over. And then as for some of the go-to plays in the deck, your biggest play is with your Gishki Grimness. You can just normal summon this card and then special summon Gishki Abyss. And Gishki Abyss can give you the search for either a Gishki Ritual or Spell search. So then you can either add Vision or Shadow to your hand. If you already have one or the other one in your hand, then just go for the other search. You can then, if you have one or the other, discard both. And from there, gain your Ritual search and then your Ritual Spell search. If you went second and your opponent has a monster, then I would recommend searching out the Necromere. Otherwise, I would add Aquamere to your hand, because then you can go for the Ritual play, having your Aquamere activate using Grimness for the entire tribute, and then summoning out your Naramonis onto the field. Naramonis activates. You can then either target the Grimness or the Vision, which is great about them is their water attribute, so your opponent can't buy-steal them away since they're not dark or light attribute. You can summon that onto the field, and then from there you can overlay the 2 together. And with that, you can go into your Gigantic Spright, activating Spright, and if it resolves, detaching 1 to special summon another monster onto the field, and that could be another Gishki Abyss. And then from here, it all depends on if you have the Spright engine in your hand. If you have just one other Spright monster, Blue or Jet especially, can continue that setup, because you've already made your level 10 on the field, you have your negate there. Gishki Abyss can give you that search, so with that, you having another one on the field, you can use Gishki Abyss to search out another Gishki Shadow, and then from that discard, you can use Gishki Shadow to search out the Necromere. With this, knowing that your opponent will have to fear you having a tribute for another ritual the following turn. And then, like I said, all it depends on is if you have a Spright monster in your hand. Depending on what you have, if you have Spright Jet or Spright Blue, or even your Spright Starter, you have a special summon for either one of these cards. And even if you just opened up your Carrot or your red into your hand, you can at least special summon either one of those 2 targets onto the field and have the Abyss for the tribute cost for those. If not, you can summon out Blue or Jet, and Jet will give you the search for Starter to then get that additional Spright monster on the field, or just using Blue to start off that whole chain, searching Blue, adding Jet, special Jet, Jet adds Starter, and then from there you can get these additional monsters onto the field. But remember, if you want to have all 6 on the field to use, place the Gigantic Spright in your extra monster zone, and then you'll have the Naramonis on the field. Which, remember, if you have the Necro Mirror in your hand, you have this card to use for a ritual summon the next turn, which you'll get when you negate one of your opponent's monster effects and bounce the Neremonus back into your hand and shuffle back their card. Then you can use the Necro Mirror to tribute their monster and summon this card back out onto the field. Like I said, we had a lot more plays to go for, especially with Gishki Abyss when we had Sprite Elf, but since that's no longer an option, we have to make do with what we have in the deck for now and all of our other cards. But I still am very happy that the deck got me first, and I hope you all enjoyed. And as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.